Data and analytics to transform your people strategy in conjunction with IBM. My name is Karen Thorfalam, and I'm Change Board's Deputy Editor. We're delighted to be joined here today by Ann-Victoire Pince, Managing HR Consultant at IBM, and Nicola Matson, Senior Solutions Consultant at IBM. They'll be talking to you about how IBM has used technology and workforce analytics to retain key talent, from developing a 100-day implementation timeline through to mining data for new insights and giving you their tips for building the business case for developing data analysis around talent. Before we begin, I'd like to run through a few guidelines. Throughout the webinar, if you'd like to pose a question or a comment to Ann-Victoire or Nicola, please enter this in the box on the right-hand side of your screen and click send. We'll be taking questions after the presentation, but please feel free to pose your question at any time, and we will try to get through as many as we can. We'll also be running a live Twitter feed throughout the webinar, so be sure to tag your tweets with the hashtag #CBAnalytics. That's hashtag #CBAnalytics. We'll also be recording the webinar, so we'll send you a link to the full recording in the next few days. In a moment, I'll hand you over to Ann-Victoire. She is a Managing Consultant for HR at IBM Smarter Workforce and has extensive experience in supporting organizations to reinvent the way they manage their workforce to maximize its potential, drive innovation, and lead change. With a strong focus on workforce analytics, she enables organizations to make informed HR decisions, shaping the employee experience that combines great leadership, innovation, and collaboration, using the power of social technologies to drive engagement and productivity. So, without further ado, I'll hand you over now to Ann-Victoire.
Thank you very much, Karen. I'm just going to share my screen. It will take just a second. Karen, can you confirm you can see my screen?
Yes, you should be able to see your screen now, yes.
Great, thank you very much. So, welcome everyone to this brief session dedicated to workforce analytics. We'll start the session with a very brief overview of analytics as applied to people management today, and we'll quickly move on to a practical example of how we've used this at IBM to make a more informed decision on our top talent that was at risk of attrition. We'll finish with showing you a tool that is available to us to facilitate the exploration of data and really how some current best-in-class technology can really support us as HR practitioners in this process. So, we really aim at reverting the 18-20 rule around data analysis, where, we typically will spend more of 80% of our time to prepare data and 20% to analyze it and get insight from it. So how can we revert that proportion to spend 80% of our time to collect useful insights and the minimum time as possible on getting the data ready? So what you can see on the screen right now is really where we are today with HR analytics. As IBM, we've run recently some research on the field and really showing that most organizations are currently aware of how workforce analytics is a game changer. We all need to be in there. We all need to engage into analytics and big data. 80% of the HR leaders that we've interviewed see this as a key priority for their organization, but really just a handful are ready to engage in this already, or actually really already doing it in an effective way. So we're all very much at the beginning of our journey around big data and analytics, and we've got a great opportunity to engage with it right now. So just before we go into more detail about what we mean by analytics and how we've used that, I just would like to come back on those 4 V's of big data. I'm sure you've heard of them, but it's really when we think about the rise of workforce analytics and how we are catching up in HR with some of the practices that we already see in marketing, in finance, in supply chain, how do we need to think about it? So the first V of the 4 V's of big data is very much on the volume. And as we all know, we are now getting an increasing amount of data that is generated and available. And the quality of that data is increasing as well. So very large volumes and of better quality. We get also a much greater variety in the data that we have access to. It is both structured in numbers, in percentages, and unstructured. So things that are more around verbatim and the tweets, the feeds on social platforms. and all of the data looks different, and we've got to be able to process the different sorts of data. Velocity is the third V, which refers to the fact that data has a counted time when it actually is relevant. So we need to be able to react to the data we have collected very quickly, so it doesn't lose its insight. To be insightful and useful, and for us to make more informed decisions, we've got to act quickly on it and to be able to exploit as quickly as possible. And the last B, which for me is really the most important one, is on veracity. So how reliable is the data? Some of the research we've done actually show that 1 in 3 CEOs do not trust their data, and really that notion of trust and establishing that trust in the data is absolutely fundamental, so we can help business in making those informed decisions and for us to be perceived as true business partners. So in that journey for analytics, I'd just like to break that down just a tiny bit more and see how data is maturing and how the insight is maturing with data, and as it follows that circle here on the screen. But here we can start at the top where it says descriptive data. And here when we're talking about descriptive, it's really responding to the question, what happened? So if we take an example of retention, because we're going to come to this in a minute, the question that we may want to ask ourselves is how many top performers actually left voluntarily in the last quarter. That's a very descriptive fact. It's let's say 5% of our top performers have intentionally leave the organization. The second step, and going a little bit further here, would be around the integrated look at the data. So how do we actually compare? And here we'll have internal comparisons, external comparisons. So in that same example, it will be what is the natural top performer turnover rate in our industry, or how does that compare to the turnover rate of top performers we had in the same quarter a year ago. Okay. Where workforce analytics gets really interesting is when we move to the next level, that is around predictive. And it's responding to the question, what is actually likely to happen? So again, taking the same example of voluntary turnover of top performers, if we can then respond to the question, what is the number one key reason why people leave, or what is likely to happen is who is actually likely to leave the organization in the next quarter. So we can plan ahead and anticipate and look at previous patterns in the data to be able to say, well, this person with that profile in the last 2 or 3 quarters have left because of that reason, so that person is likely to leave for that particular reason. So we are much more predictive in our look of the data. And where analytics can become really transformational is when we are able to also offer prescriptive actions that can be undertaken to resolve the source of the problem. So, what should we do? And that's really the answer to that question. So again, what is the action we should take to retain this key talent? What have we found in the data that really worked in the past? Or what do we know will be the most critical factor to retain a particular person? There's one mention here at the bottom of the page on the foundation of analytics, which I think we shouldn't underestimate, and that's very much on anticipating the need for change management. So if we think about bringing that notion of data and big data and analytics within an HR function, it's going to transform the way HR practitioners have worked, or at least making it evolve. And that requires a change of perspective, a change in the practices, and we should anticipate for potential resistance in this. I don't know if any of you have had the chance to go on YouTube and see the Google story of the head of analytics at Google sharing how their initial projects on analytics actually was resisted just because of that, just because it was a bit of a shift, and that the HR didn't want to have data and analytics as a replacement for their own decision making, but an additional point of information to make more informed decisions. So it's how data and analytics is used to help HR, and obviously not about replacing any human judgment. Okay. Okay, we have done more recently as well, published a paper on really the top key steps that one should undertake when starting the workforce analytics journey, really the first 100 days. And what has come through as absolutely key and fundamental for a successful approach around analytics is that it shouldn't be data for the sake of data. It's not because we have many data and very various in different sources that it's sufficient. We need to have the right data to answer business priority. And that has come through more and more. And again, I'm just passing on the message of all those interviews that we've run with head of analytics that are telling us, for this to really land well in a business, it has got to have business relevance. Another point we've found here important is that perfect data isn't required for a successful analysis. So we can start small. We can start with a pilot on one part of the business. We can start with just one simple question and build from that. That little pilot, that quick win, will actually help in convincing the skeptics, in building the case and ensuring the value that this could bring is taken to a wider level. Just in more detail on that first 100 days of analytics, and you may actually find that paper available or on the blog of our Smarter Workforce Institute, the IBM Institute. That may just be useful. It really details those different 10 steps that you can see on the screen. And you'll see it's quite intuitive and quite simple. But we found those 10 steps as actually good stepping stones for engaging into that journey. Obviously, the first one is establish the vision to confirm the scope of the analysis. What are we going to show and why? Is really responding to that why and the business imperative that is behind. Second step is really on what is the model of governance. How are you going to then consult with the HR business partners, the business executives to really understand their challenges and understand the rules of the game, as simple as that, around privacy regulations, around laws that allow us or not to use certain data, and work with the work councils that also may get into the way. So even before we start and engage into too much work, really understanding what are going to be our enablers and obstacles from both a human perspective and a more legal perspective. Quick wins, we've just talked about that. And again, starting simple, small can really help. And again, also in getting the right advocates for the program. So that's really in setting the direction. When we move into defining your approach, here we're talking about know your data, knowing the data that we have access to, and who actually owns the data and the data management. That's where having a good network in the different functions may actually help. The technology, know your technology options. Do we want to go with something more traditional, such as SPSS, for example, or do we want to go with newer technologies, most of them being on the cloud? Again, considering that some organizations have anti-cloud policies, some will actually be pro-cloud policies. So really make use of those different options and exploring the market. The partners, what are the options? Do you want to insource that, to outsource that, or to partner? How will be the implication? What will be the implications of upskilling an entire function or recruiting people externally to do the job? Now, if we go into that particular piece of growing the capability and going further in there, if you want to also do that more internally, identifying the roles and skills will be important. In analytics functions, we'll need a leader, someone who will have both a step in HR and a step in the business. that can make the link and the connection between the two. We'll need people with skills around change management, around HR domain, around statistical skills and data sciences, but also consulting and really be able to be more of a change HR business partner. The business plan, and that's very much around what's the cost of upskilling HR business partners or creating a center of excellence. What are the practical implications that we've got to anticipate for? Build the momentum, and that's very much around communication and influence, making it visible, and then in the implementation, here I would just mention the importance of evaluating the impact of the intervention. Okay. Now, as I said, these were to be very, very brief intro on analytics, and what we wanted to really share was how we've been using this at IBM to retain our key talent. Also conscious of time, so I'll be brief, but the way we have used analytics recently at IBM was to proactively identify our top talent at risk and take the appropriate action to retain them. As you can see on the slide here, the way we've done that was really to look at a lot of data that we have collected over the years to try to really understand the reason for attrition of our key talent. And here, we wanted to understand what are the factors and that contribute to that, and build a model that will help us to, based on that historical data, identify those people at risk of attrition today. In the population that we have targeted, we've really only taken the employees with high performance. We haven't included employees with low or declining performance, and performance is assessed on a regular basis at IBM. And we haven't either targeted people with easily replaceable skills. So it was really a focus on top performers with very specific experience, knowledge, or competencies. Okay. So after that first step of understanding the reasons for attrition, and that's based on historical exit survey data, on also individual related data that will list, but it's really about the position, the performance data in the past, the compensation data as compared to their peers, their role, the date of the last promotion before exiting the organization, the history of salary changes, any sort of demographic information that we've had, the experiences, education, and so on. So we had a myriad of data points to explain some of the reasons why people left. So based on that, we were able to identify employees likely to leave the organization. Our second step was really to understand the cost of attrition. So taking into account salary premium. So that's the salary of a new employee that is likely to be higher than the one of the exiting or leaving employees. So the salary premium, the hiring cost, and also the productivity loss. We've modeled that cost of attrition with the potential investment that it will cost us to give a pay rise to that employee at risk and factor the two. So we've then, in the third step, identified the optimal compensation investment that we'll have to make in order to retain the employee. And then, based on that, we've actually choose the employees to retain. So obviously, when we did actually this pilot study in a country where remuneration was one of the key factors for leaving an organization. We have found since that in other countries, career progression is the #1 reason for leaving an organization. So we wouldn't typically focus on salary. That was just really the specificities of that particular country. On the measurement that we have made at a middle term after the intervention, we've seen that the attrition has reduced for the targeted population by at 25% as compared to the overall population. So it was much, much lower. And we also had a comparison group, a control group for this study. And in that control group, they left twice as much as the targeted group. So it's quite a compelling story on how we've used analytics to proactively engage in retaining top talent. On that note, I'm going to pass on the lead to my colleague Nicolas to show you some of the technology that we use to run similar analysis.
Many thanks, Avi. So we'll just hand over to Nicolas Matson now. So just bear with us 1 second.
Thank you, Avi. Can everyone see the screen now?
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you.
So in the last few minutes of today's session, we just wanted to quickly give you a very high-level introduction to a new analytics platform recently launched by IBM called Talent Insights. And it is very different from other visualizations or BI tools that are on the marketplace today. It will be just a very quick overview, but hopefully we'll cover off some of the key differentiators that set this product apart from some of the other tools that we might be used to using today. And Avi mentioned in her presentation that from an HR function perspective, lots of organizations are only really just starting that analytics journey. And there's a couple of reasons for that, but one of them may be because that historically a lot of the technologies that people needed to use to be able to gain real insight in that data weren't particularly user-friendly and might have required a lot of deep technical or statistical know-how. And also with the more traditional BI dashboards, it's often a very lengthy process to create those dashboards. It's very iterative, and as an HR function, you're reliant on other individuals like IT people, maybe data statisticians or scientists. What we've tried to do with the Talent Insights platform is build a new solution that is aimed at the HR professional at the end, as the end user, and removes any of that reliance on any other individuals within your organization. So getting instant access to the data, instant access to insights about your workforce, using a tool that is very easy to use and that allows you to actually interact with the data using natural language. So we're just on the main dashboard of the Talent Insights platform now. If anyone is wondering, Greenwell is just a fictitious organization that we use for our demo environments. And there's a few different ways that we can start to interact with the data. But first, let's just talk very quickly about how the data gets into the system. So Talent Insights can take feeds from all of your different HR systems. So some organizations are a little bit further in that analytics journey. They may already have a data warehouse or a data lake where they're aggregating data from their disparate HR systems. But for lots of organizations, they're not at that point. They still have isolated pockets of data in different systems. And it's very difficult to start to do that integrated analytics that Ann-Victoire talked about. What we can do with Talent Insights is take feeds from all of those systems into the Talent Insights framework, and then we can start to analyze that data. So once the data is in the system, there's a few things we can do. We can just start by asking a question, and I'll mention in a little bit what why Watson is relevant here. We can also have preloaded visualizations. So if there are things as a business you're regularly tracking and monitoring, maybe using attrition as the example that Ann-Victoire gave, we can have those as preloaded questions that I can just click and get a quick answer and a quick insight into that pattern or trend. The third way that we can work with the data is through what we call workbooks, which is where we can run some analysis, gain some insights, and start to save different visualizations that might tell a story that support maybe a business decision or strategy that I want to put in place within my organization. But I'm going to start by asking Watson a question. And Watson's relevant because one of the technologies that Talent Insights is built on, so it actually uses a few different IBM capabilities, but one of them is that Watson cognitive capability. So Watson is a supercomputer that IBM built a number of years ago that understands natural language. So this is much more sophisticated than a search engine where you're just looking for keyword matches. This system understands natural language, it understands HR language, and we teach it to understand your business language. So as an HR professional, I can have a conversation with my data using exactly the same language that I might use with one of my colleagues. So I'm going to start with a pretty basic question. I'm going to ask it, what is the source of my employees? So this is, often a question that you might ask of your recruitment data. And lots of businesses might form recruitment strategies based on this data alone, and that really is only telling half the picture, because where you're hiring people from isn't necessarily where you're getting your best performers or the people that stay with the organization. So what we can see as I ask that question is it's telling me it's got different data sets available with which it can answer that question. And this particular example, I'm going to use my Greenwell data set. It's then telling me that there are relevant ways it can answer the question and some somewhat relevant ways. So what it will also do, and it actually uses SPSS to do this, is it will read that data file and start to look for other trends and patterns that sit within the data set that are sort of related to my question but maybe not answering it directly. But I'm going to come in and look at my bar chart so we can see that we can view this as either a tree map or a bar chart. And that will now produce the visualization for me. So one of the real differentiators of this tool is the speed with which you can start to gain these insights. And I'm going to go through this very quickly because I'm conscious we've only got a few minutes left. But I might start to manipulate this visualization. So for a start, I want to just quickly sort so that I can see very quickly and easily where am I getting my volume of hires from. And I can see that I'm getting them from Twitter and from referrals. What it's doing across the top is again using that SPSS capability. It's looking for other trends and patterns in the data set and it's showing me them. It's what we call guided data discovery. So I don't need to necessarily understand my data, and more importantly, I'm not necessarily misled by bias or supposition or any gut feeling that I have about my data. It's telling me where I should look at patterns. But let's quickly move on and say, well, this is interesting to me, but if we look at that integrated analytics, it would be more interesting if I could see whether these people that I'm hiring from Twitter and from referrals are actually high performers. So I'm actually going to switch over and add in a new dimension to my visualization. In my fictitious organization, 1 is the highest, 4 is the lowest. So I can sort of see that rehire looks good. It's a little bit difficult for me to consume this visualization, so I'm going to change it over to a stack chart. Now I can see that rehires are all within the performance 1 and 2 banding. But I've got a lot of performance 1 and 2 in Twitter, but I would expect that because I've got much higher volume. So really, to do a fair comparison, what I want to do is look at this from a percentages perspective. So now I can see that, interestingly, whilst we have few hires through rehire, actually they're all top 1 and 2 performance rating. And I might say, well, let's see if that actually follows through. What about engagement? So you can see that any of these fields across the top I can change very quickly and easily. So there are very few tools where you can start to manipulate the data with this speed, and I get a very beautiful and colourful graphic that probably is very difficult for anyone watching this to really comprehend what this is telling me. And that's because we've got 0 to 100, obviously, from an engagement score perspective. So what I can do is very quickly come in and create a new field that didn't necessarily exist in my data source, but I can create it within Talent Insights. So I can say that I want to create a band based on engagement with equal distribution. I'm doing 5 bands, but I can change this, it will reflect appropriately. And it's now creating that as a new element that I can start to work with. So rather than looking at it by engagement, I can now look at it by engagement band. And now I can see 80 to 100, obviously the most engaged individuals. All of my rehires are very highly engaged. So this is just a simple example where I'm just pulling in recruitment and performance data, but I could start to bring in data from lots of other systems, maybe bringing in business metrics. You know, if you're a manufacturing company and you want to look at accident rates, or if you're a retailer and you want to look at NPS scores and whether or not, you know, your recruitment strategy reflects bringing in people into the organization who are highly engaged and who are providing a better service to your customers. Lots more we can do here. Just a couple of other things to call out. I'm conscious we're a couple of minutes over, so I hope that people will stay with us just for a few more seconds. What the system is also clever enough to do is to work out if potentially it needs to join different data sets to be able to answer a question that it can't answer with just one data set. So here I'm asking a question around verbal reasoning and logical reasoning by country. So these are assessment scores. And what it's telling me is that if it merges 2 files, so I've got a file that has my verbal and logical reasoning in it but no country, and I have another file that has also employee data, and it's worked out, this is a core HRS file, so lots of data here about our individuals, but it's worked out that it can join an employee ID to be able to answer that holistic question. So it can do this joining, data joining, that historically we've needed to go to an IT department for. It can now do that on the fly for you. What we can also do is just drag and drop data into the system. So I might have an Excel spreadsheet that maybe I'm just maintaining on my hard drive. It's not coming from a particular HR system, but I still want to use the power of this tool to gain insights in that data. I can simply drag and drop the file in. It will actually not only load the file into the Talent Insights database, but it will analyze that data. And again, using that statistical capability, it will start to surface to me trends and patterns. So without doing anything, I haven't asked it any questions, it's already telling me that it could be interesting for me to look at sales by country or performance by age. So it's starting to surface those trends for me. And that's all available in Talent Insights today. We do have a couple of things coming in Q4. Very quickly wanted to just very briefly overview. One is this predict capability, and this is the example that Ann-Victoire gave around looking at predicting attrition. So we now have the ability of, rather than bringing in data statisticians and giving them weeks to run modelling across all of the different data that we know about our individuals that have left the business, we can within seconds have the system build a statistical model based on all of the predictors of attrition that we know about these people that have left an organisation. And in my example here, it's worked out that there are 10 statistical predictors of attrition. The biggest one is whether or not someone works overtime, but also their job level, their years with the current manager. All of these are statistical predictors of attrition. But the real power comes into play when we start to look at what are the different combinations of those 10 predictors, and I'm looking where attrition is yes, that are most likely to lead to somebody leaving the organisation. So it works out 5 paths, number 1 being the highest predictor. And read left to right, this is telling me that people that work overtime in a job level 5 who are not entitled to stock enrolment are the most likely to leave the organisation. But what I can also see in the second path is it also includes people not entitled to stock options. And actually, so does the 5th likely predictive path. So I can go back to the business now and suggest that we extend enrolment to our stock option program to maybe include lower bands or people that haven't been with the organisation as long, because we know with statistical rigour, so removing the guesswork, bringing the precision and the statistical know-how, we can predict that that will reduce attrition rate within the organisation. So that's called Predict. That's coming at the end of this year. And the other piece that we're launching at the end of this year is something called Assemble. And this is a way really to build those dashboards that you might already be familiar with. You might be using BI dashboards today, but if you've gone through that process of having those built, you'll know that if you're lucky, it takes weeks. More typically, it might take months. It's very iterative. It involves lots of people. As an HR person, you're very dependent on other people to build these dashboards for you. And maybe you get your dashboard and something's quite interesting and you want to delve into that in a bit more detail, but you can't because you need to go back to the people that built the dashboard. These dashboards take minutes to create. This one took me about 4 or 5 minutes. I can use the same natural language to ask questions. It presents appropriate visualizations to me, and then I just drop them into my dashboard. And they're interactive. So a nice example that I use here, maybe I'm an HRO, I'm being challenged about the amount of money that I'm spending on referrals when the business is trying to cut costs. I can say at a glance, to the board, look, when we look at the organisation as a whole, we've got an average culture fit of 69, a performance of 2, and a potential of 2.4. But if I just look at my referrals, I can see that actually I've got a more highly performing and potential group of candidates or new hires that we've brought into the business, which hopefully it will refresh. I'm unfortunately on a customer's wireless network at the moment, but what will happen when it refreshes, it will show that for referrals, that culture fit, performance and potential are actually higher. So I can prove within seconds that it is worth spending money on referrals because we're getting more out of the people that we bring in through that referral program. Lots more that's also coming later in this year and through into 2016, but we did just want to give you really a high-level taster today. So I will stop now. I know we're a few minutes over, and just see if anybody has any questions that they need answering.
Thank you very much there, Nicola. I've just brought Ann-Victoire back into the piece, so thank you both for an insightful presentation. Very interested to learn about workforce analytics capability at IBM. I know we have run over, we've got time for a few quick questions. So firstly, I was just wondering, how can one go about justifying the investment in workforce analytics? That's either AB or to Nicola.
Sorry, I was on mute. I was just thanking you for the great question. It is a very good question, and that's a question a lot of the people that we also share stories with and work with ask us. What we'll typically do is build the return on investment and model that. So let's say, again, coming back to that attrition issue that some people have, we can model the cost of losing key talent, their contribution to the business, factoring the cost of hire and the salary premium, and actually, with a simple target of reducing turnover by a couple of percent, what will be the impact on the business? I'm currently sitting in France, and here we have a particular question on absenteeism. So it's less that people actually leave the organization, is that they stay, but they are not as committed. So how can we then predict for where absenteeism will be and reduce the cost of absenteeism in better anticipating for it? So again, we model that, and I think it's very important before anyone engages into this that we can model what will be the impact and target where we want to reduce costs with those interventions.
Excellent. And another question just for yourself, Avi, from the audience. On your second slide, you said that 90% of people see HR analytics as key. We've got a question from the audience saying, who are those 90%? Are they HR professionals? Are they the CEOs of the company? Or is it a mixture or another group entirely?
Okay, yeah, it's mainly HR professionals. So there are actually two studies here. The most of the study, that what you can see on the top, is actually CHROs, so HRDs and CHROs that we have interviewed, and that's part of the IBM study of last year. That's based on 342 CHROs, and the one at the bottom is a Deloitte study that they conducted, including CEOs. So it's a mix. But on the 90%, it's a mix of CHROs and CEOs.
Okay, excellent. And perhaps one for Nicola here, again from the audience, on the system. Someone says it looks quite complicated to use. So how long would it take someone to get used to using the system?
That's interesting. Normally I get told it looks very easy to use. Well, I was given access to the system without any training. In fact, I've never had any training. I've just learned to use it myself. But I would say literally 5–10 minutes to be taught how to use it. You literally are just asking a question using the same language that you might ask a colleague, and then just manipulating the visualization. So you definitely don't need to have a technical background. It's not something that takes very long to learn to use.
Okay, excellent. And perhaps for both of you, how do you avoid becoming overwhelmed perhaps by the amount of data that becomes available? How can you make sure you refine it to the right things that you need to learn about?
Sorry, can you say that again? How do you not get overwhelmed by?
So some people are asking, how would you avoid becoming overwhelmed perhaps by the amount of data that is generated through analytics? How can you make sure you refine it to what you need?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where some of those initial steps are absolutely critical in setting the right frame. So there is so much data available. How do you actually tie that to your particular objectives and get step by step? And my recommendation will be really identify the key objective that you want to tackle. Define the strategic direction. So in the sense that what will be the frame for making decisions to go or not go a particular way, and identify the right data sources. In the approach that we are taking, we are actually designing HR specific templates for those different questions to frame that conversation as well. So we know that by experience in particular industries, and for particular business relevant questions, there are variables that we've got to include, and some that might be a nice to have, but that guidance as well and experience of those that have been running those initiatives before are useful. So I would say, as I just mentioned, establish your objective and your vision, and then take the right frames and from people that have got that experience.
Excellent. Thank you, Ann-Victoire. Well, we have run over our time, so thank you both for your insights and your presentations. Just a reminder to the audience that we'll be sending out the recorded version of this webinar the next couple of days, so please do look out for that. Obviously, we had a high volume of questions, but little time, unfortunately, so if anyone has any more questions they would like to ask, please feel free to send them in on the feedback form, and we will pose them to the guys and get it in the send out. So once again, thank you all for taking the time to join us today, to our sponsors IBM and to Ann-Victoire and Nicola. We look forward to seeing you on another Change Board webinar soon. Have a very good afternoon. Thank you.